Asteroid of fear.
Good.
We don't want to miss it.
Let's not miss a thing.
Yeah. So, how do you say your last name?
Noterer.
Noterer. All right. Yeah, I was listening to an interview this morning, and the guy, he made the attempt, and then he said, I don't know if I'm saying it right. And then he never asked you.
Oh,
So I figured I would at least go one step further. I would
good.
ask.
Uh,
All
my
right.
my name has been mispronounced and misspelled my entire life.
And sometimes that's okay. Depends
Yeah,
on who's looking for you, right?
that's right.
Sometimes you can use it to your advantage.
Advantage, exactly. That's a good point.
All right. Well, I'll make a slight introduction and we'll just get into it. We'll get into kind of a little bit about your growing up. I won't necessarily say where you grew up, but how you grew up and then yeah, we'll get into everything. And I listened to a little bit, just enough to get a feel, but not enough, not enough so I could also remain as curious as the listener.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today we're going to be talking to Dave Letterfly Noterer. And wow, in describing him, um, when I think like modern day Renaissance man, although that's not so uncommon to like a Gen Xer. So I think of somewhere of maybe Hunter S. Thompson, but not on drugs and on a motorcycle and a horse. Does that sound a little bit about right?
Sort of, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
some George Plimpton mixed in there somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there was somebody man, I forget. It was along those same lines of that era of journalism and man, somebody and I don't know if I wrote it down, but he was a very notable figure and I want to say like had this more Midwest feel, but in terms of they said great storytelling and yeah, it's kind of evolved. And that's why I kind of say like, as a Gen Xer, it's you kind of embrace the half nomad part of what I think of like one of my godfathers was a motorcycle enthusiast
Uh-huh.
and like the rock star lifestyle along with circus carney mixed in there but also, so there was kind of a mystique to it back then because we didn't have all the internet, we didn't have all the other stuff, everything was wrapped up into a magazine. I guess all the tales or they had to be told. And now we have information so readily available. And you know, and And so, yeah, it's like you kind of embody a little bit of both. And so I'm interested to definitely see how that's kind of working out for you. Because I always say, like, as a Gen Xer, one of the benefits is you kind of know how things work before the internet. And now you know how they work now. And it's really about infusing them and figuring out how to use each to your advantage without letting too much of it drive you crazy if that makes sense. Because technology, you've seen a lot of technology, and it can be both beneficial and detrimental. So, yeah. Where and how did you grow up?
I grew up in Ohio on a university campus, the son of a opera singer mother and a Lutheran minister father.
Oh,
And
okay.
we and we had a I had an older brother who produced bizarre behavior for which there was no explanation for back in the 50s and 60s. Now,
Ah,
later on, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, but there
okay.
was there was no name for it back when I was a kid. All I knew was that it was frustrating, and he was the focus of the whole family.
Man, yeah. So op I go Ohio, opera singer, Lutheran uh minister, pastor, whatever
Yeah,
you said, whatever they call it. I don't want to
yeah.
offend anyone. I think partially education liberal, but then also I think semi-conservative in terms of value somewhat, but the fact that they didn't have a name for that, at that time, you're reaching into the unknown. You're looking for explanations far beyond what we know at the time. And I'm sure even at some point in time, maybe people thought your parents were crazy or your brother was crazy. And just because we didn't have a name because our human minds couldn't put a label on it. And so while I think it's interesting to go highly educated area when you say university and pastor, like, you know, not people that you would normally label, like, let's say, as kooky or anything like that. But if you have something you can't explain and you're looking for explanations that are unknown, um, I think it could come across to the unknown and untrained eye, especially at that time. Man, that had to be a whirlwind of emotions and what you were attempting to grow up with. So,
When,
what did
when I
that look like for you? How did you take that all in and process that?
when I was a little boy, the first time I ventured out of the house, I discovered all the other kids in the neighborhood were picking on my brother. So my perception of the world around me was that it was not a very nice place. And that influenced me socially. I became reluctant and I withdrew into creativity. So I became a reserved little boy, and I invented my own little world to succeed in that
Oh,
in, that included creativity and exploration and discovery and those kinds of the stuff that I could manage by myself.
what were the influences of that time? Because, like I mentioned, um, probably not so much as my listeners, but, I always say, um, my kids and their kids hopefully are going to hear this one day. And so a reflection of the times. What were your sources of kind of inspiration and what was going on? What did you have to draw from in terms of art, radio, music? What was the world like at that time?
Well, there were only, I think, three television channels at that time. So there were regular things that occurred during the week, like Sunday night was the Ed Sullivan Show, and when somebody came to the door and knocked on the door to say hello, my mother turned the television off,
Hmm.
and then she would greet the person at the door and stuff. So there was
Etiquette.
a yeah, different etiquette back in those days. We had the milkman that delivered milk to the house, and since we grew up on a university campus, there were uh, university activities that took place throughout the year that we couldn't help but notice, and I became involved in those things. And you walk to school and all that kind of stuff. So early influences. My dad loved the circus. So an early influence for me was adopting his passion for the circus. And the circus came to town every summer, and I would get up early and go out there and I'd get a job helping him out. So
Oh, so it was actually being like what do you call it? Almost like the vendors and stuff. So participating that way is almost as a way to view it. Um, not just getting your ticket and going in as a spectator, but actually participating in the circus. He
Yeah,
loved.
as a kid, yeah, going out there and studying how they did things,
God.
helping carry the folding chairs and putting them into the bleachers, and helping will lace up the canvas tents and carry poles and all that kind of stuff. And then I got to see how it worked, which
Mm.
was and I'm already a visual person because I was reluctant socially. I probably excelled at being observant because I uh, overdeveloped that area of my being because of the neglect socially.
Yeah.
So and then I became as a kid I built a model circus and it worked
Now,
just like.
speaking of, well, hold on one second. You said, and this piques my curiosity, because there's other little kids out there who might identify with this, but you said you were a little awkward socially, and that means especially with kids your own age or your brother's age because they were picking on him. But um, being part of the circus and seeing how it works and getting to go behind the scenes, did you ever get to talk to any people of the circus, and were you less reluctant to do that because that kind of piqued your interest? And did that have anything to do with like kind of getting to see behind the scenes as a kid and maybe talk to people and understand what the lifestyle was about?
Yeah, I think that I even around the university campus, I was able to go and explore, and I would go in and out of the different laboratory buildings and class in the observatory and the different places that had professors and students and stuff. And just like at the circus, I could go around and hang around where the elephants were being taken care of and
You got
then
along with, did you get along with strangers more than you did like maybe those in the immediate circle?
yeah, what I did was I was an observer, probably a non-threatening observer, and so that the professors at the classrooms just kind of let me do what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yet I didn't get in trouble because I was not being inappropriate, and so I probably learned uh, behaviors, social behaviors even though I was socially reluctant. I wasn't as especially in tune to reading body language and facial expressions and stuff to tell the different moods of people
Yeah.
stuff, but I was able to be appropriate with my behavior that allowed me to excel as a explorer and a discoverer.
Yeah. So I know kind of how you got into, I mean, I love this because I was into music as a child, and you talk about opera, and it's funny. It's funny because a lot of people say I grew up like kind of rock and roll and like at 6, 7 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I always say I love all music, and respect all music, but I don't really like listen to opera. But I know the level of difficulty that it is. But you're exposed to all these things, and I'm guessing at some point because this is, I think, relevant to how you make your intro to potentially getting in the circus more is you were exposed to music, right? And you started playing drums somewhere in this.
I actually started playing piano when I was a child. Mom,
Uh-huh.
she taught us all piano lessons, and then I switched to trumpet in grade school, and then there was a little fallow period, and then in junior high school is when I uh, decided I wanted to be a drummer, and I was on fire. And because of my background with piano and trumpet and reading music, I was able to excel and shoot right up to the very top in the orchestra in just one semester. And I was first chair for the rest of my high school years. And so that was the skill that I took to the circus. I started as a circus drummer, circus and I think that it was not only a way to excel with music, but creatively, because the drummer is the guy that accents the efforts of all the performers. When
Oh, I forget about that back in that time, the
the
little da-dum, psh.
Yeah, she kicks her leg up in the air and you coordinate a rim shot with it to
Ah.
more. And then there's drum roll to heighten the drama and then all the other stuff. So yeah, it was a creative outlet for me. And then I discovered performing. And performing was a way to, I think it was probably a means to an end in regards to being social. There was probably part of me that wanted to connect with other people.
Right.
And in the circus ring, whenever I showed them what my initially I had my first act was a pony act. I had six ponies that did a precision drill in the circus. And once I showed the audience what my ponies would do, and then I acknowledged them and to get some applause, it gave me probably some social approval.
What did let's take a couple of steps back. In joining the circus, kind of how did that conversation go? So your dad being an enthusiast, I'm certain you had some support from him, but um at that time, like I always say, let's paint that picture of that time as, that's like the equivalent of people who go out and pursue music careers and they're going to go on the road as performers. Um, it's a big deal, probably not as what people think of it as today, because the times are different. You're coming out of different events, whether it be world wars and depressions and the mindset of work and everything of what America's trying to build is totally different. Um, how was that conversation with your dad, and what kind of thoughts did you have? Did you have any thoughts of like, hey, this is something I'm gonna do for a long time, or this is just a summer thing? What were your thoughts about kind of undertaking this life as a traveling performer, if you
Well,
will?
yeah, during my teenage years, I was a very frustrated teenager because the condition of my brother just amplified the everything being just awkward and frustrating at home. So I was actually my intention was to run away and join the circus. And my dad, when he found out about it, he was dead set against it because that simply was just not practical.
Right.
He loved the circus, but he had never had the ability to go and participate, during his boyhood. Uh, so he was actually dead set against it. And once he realized how serious I was, he made a deal with me. And it took several years because once I ended up having a successful, right out of the gate, a successful experience with the circus. And it took a couple years, and my dad finally realized, hey, this kid is having a blast. He's living an interesting life. He's doing what he loves to do. He's making people happy with what he does, and he's having the time of his life. And so he softened up and became more of one of my cheerleaders. He would became a source of encouragement.
With your brother being the source of so much of your mom and dad's focus, um, who who do you think you sought approval from more?
From approval.
Yeah, from yourself and like what you're seeking, like from your mom or your dad, because your relationship has to have a level of strain because all their energy goes to your brother.
Yeah.
And so the love and connection with your parents, that relationship has to be slightly different. And so oftentimes we're seeking the approval of one of our parents. Do
Yeah.
you think you were and do you think you were seeking some approval from either one? And which one do you think you were seeking approval of most? Because you kind of got your dad's circus hood, your mom's love for music, a little bit of everything going on there.
Definitely.
And what about your brother? Were you seeking anything from him? Did you and him understand each other? I mean, since they didn't have a word from it, did y'all have a relationship? Was there anything
No,
there?
no,
Okay.
there wasn't anything there. I hated my brother because all I could do is all I saw was that he was the source of, all the frustration. And my dad, I loved my dad, but my dad was missing a lot from the home back in those days. He would be away from the home for sometimes 5 days a week. And so as a little boy, I sought his approval, and then as as I grew and the situation just plain became frustrating, I ended up realizing that I was going to be better off if I figured out how to do things myself. And so there was like a, a tendency to become completely self-sufficient without any influence from those around me. And then gradually, it re the strained relationship that I had with my dad ended up healing, and we ended up becoming the best of friends. So I would say that probably my dad is the strongest influencer in regards to uh, what it was that I yearned for, what I sought for.
Yeah. So, um, so you said a couple of successful summers, you're getting into this, you get your dad's supporting you. You mentioned drums, pony, but as we'll get into, you do so many different things. I'm most interested definitely like in the Harley route type
Hmm.
thing. But what other kind of skills do you start to pick up, and what other behaviors kind of start to enter in? When do you kind of, I guess, start questioning, I get every young man has this, this sense of exploration, figuring out who they are, and how we do it is usually reckless, but um, in discovering that, I guess maybe we push limits. We're looking for the edge and the boundary and everything. But how does that materialize for you as part of the circus? Because we know that definitely traveling from place to place, not having to put down roots, seeing different people, um, man, there's opportunity for a lot of fun, but also a lot of riffraff if you're into that.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that among the skills that were developed, I actually painted something before I ever played drums for the first time. The circus people have a kind of an interesting way of finding out what it is that you're good at.
Oh,
And as soon as they found out that I had an artistic tendency, they had me letter a ticket box. I lettered Wild Animal Annex on a ticket box and before I ever played the drums. And so my sign painting skills were ongoingly developing as I became a better circus man. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to invent myself as a valuable person. So I was all about learning all the skills I could, learning to splice rope and put fix electrical cables and twist a whip popper, all of the little unusual skills that they use around a circus. I could, I put the sideshow tent up and down every day, and so there's a lot of, I guess you'd call that physical um, understanding. What is that? Physics? Yeah, when you're
yeah.
when
It's
you're
kind
learning
of like a
things. Yeah.
man, it's wild because I think like any job, that's what makes what creates value over time is if somebody who's been doing it a long time, but they know all the ins and outs or can do all these little odd things, like let's say it's within a building, a property, when you need to know why something is the way it is.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, those things come in handy and they got to be passed down. A lot of people don't think about that part. Or there's all these things that get done that sometimes people don't realize that those things have to get done, and because they're not the one doing them, they never understand that somebody actually does them.
Uh-huh.
I love that. Um, yeah, so what is how does how does your personal life develop during this time on the road? Are you becoming more socially, are you getting more social courage? Are you um experimenting with alcohol, drugs, women, girlfriends? What is that kind of the personal life like outside of the circus and performing?
Yeah, socially, I ended up meeting a very special individual on the circus who uh, actually encouraged me to uh, attempt to disclose some of my uh, inner thoughts and ideas and stuff. And so I ended up having an opportunity to develop the ability to reveal what was going on inside because I had been so, secretive as a kid because, revealing anything was it was just a source of ridicule. So I ended up having an opportunity to begin to become socially uh, able. And then whenever I was introduced to horsemanship gave me a functional way to enter into a practical relationship with another living being.
Ah,
And I learned horse sense, which I was able to apply later on, and not only with my uh, other creative skills, certainly my painting skills, but especially my writing skills. There's a lot of ways that horsemanship overlaps some of the other things that I do. But like you said, I was also developing an alcohol problem. I developed the habit of the consumption of the same amount every day. And as the years went by, that stuff got a grip on me, and I had to eventually do something about it. And that was to hit my bottom and become devastated and reach out for help, which was something that I was reluctant to do because of my childhood experience. But I had to overcome that in order to enter into the process of recovery from alcoholism. I had to become social. I had to become intimate with the other members of the group and especially with the sponsor figure. So uh, the the things learned in horsemanship were expanded upon in the process of recovery from alcoholism, and I became a people person. I transformed from a reluctant, uh, withdrawn person in charge of his own life into a service oriented people person that I am today. And that's what drives my words and my projects, the books that I write, and those kinds of things, because I'm thinking of the benefit to the reader,
what did
which
how did the alcohol use start? Was it a social lubricant before shows, or was it a after thing, or
just
how did it start?
it started as just a nightcap, just a beer before bed, and then it grew to uh, by the time I was on the King Brothers Circus in 1978, I had a beer before the show, and it was sort of like you said, it was a lubricant. And and then as the years went by the time I was a sign painter in the 80s, have sipping beer while you were sign painting was acceptable back then. Back in some of those sign shops, the sign painters brought several cans of beer with them in their lunchbox so they could sip on beer. It helped to steady the hand and make it because they sat there at the bench and lettered signs all day. And so, and that, so as the years went by, my consumption increased because I was, sipping beer all day long.
What you mentioned something interesting. So, what kind of things were you doing when the circus wasn't in tow traveling? If you're kind of making an effort to participate in that, and like let's say that goes on, but you mentioned sign painting. Yeah, I almost thought I said something else. Sign painting and whatnot. What were you doing kind of in between the circus? Because that seems like, like you said, that was allowed. It's almost like being a rock star that's allowed to have one. It's almost expected. It's okay to have drinks before you go on stage.
Uh-huh.
So that being acceptable, it's interesting. Do people find their way to that because it's acceptable, or do they find their way because it's acceptable and then they just end up doing it?
Or
Um,
or it's functional, like
yeah.
they can use it to extinguish the butterflies in their stomach, you know?
Well, it's funny because the thing that you used it for and got you to that, and it turned around, you weren't a people person, and you ended up having to use alcohol to become a people person, and then you ended up having to kick alcohol, and now you're a people person without alcohol. It's like you became the thing you needed to become.
Yeah.
Um, if you could do, but of course, we all know it in the struggle, it's like we
Yeah,
just have to go through the journey, you
if
know?
you if you can do it in childhood, like we were supposed to learn all these skills on the playground, then you
Yeah, I
save
know.
a lot of grief.
Yeah. Yeah, so what were you doing in between the circus? What were some of your jobs?
The It's interesting that you say that because the circus is seasonal. That means that the season was only a little over a half a year long. So that meant there was a big hiatus between circus seasons, and that's when I discovered that I could find something to paint. And my tendency as a sign painter took off. It was like the perfect trade because no matter where I was in the country, I could find something to do that would provide me with some income. Because I was not, I was more of I think I had more of an entrepreneurial mentality eh, rather than uh, an employee mentality. And the only time I really worked for uh, in a job situation was when I was an apprentice. And the reason that I got the job as an apprentice was because I wanted to learn sign painting skills.
Hmm.
And then as soon as I had the skills I wanted, I went back to freelancing.
What was how was how did you decide, and what was it like? And I'm sure people thought you were crazy, but you said kind of wherever you were, you could paint signs. What kind of did you ever just come off wherever the circus was and decide like I'm gonna stay here? Or did you always go back to Ohio, or what was the deal there?
No, I ended up evolving into a snowbird, spending the winters down south, and then typically you work during the summer season, uh, across the northern part of the country.
Yeah.
And the way that and there was this one summer that I was not on a circus, and my intention was to have the summer of my lifetime. And I had my very first Volkswagen bus, and I had painted Crazy Davy all over down the side of it, and had all kinds of artwork all over the whole thing. And my intention was to travel from northern Michigan and go down through the Smoky Mountains during the fall of the year, and then in the wintertime land in Florida, and I was painting signs all along the way. It would be like an adventure, and I'd get to the next town and something would happen, and I'd have a incredible opportunity, and I'd thrive for a while. I was on my way through uh southern Indiana, and I go almost to Scottsburg, Indiana, and the Volkswagen broke down. And so I had to walk to the exit, and I made friends with the guy at the gas station. He had a tow truck, and he came and dragged it back to his gas station. And then the first thing I did was I pinstriped all the drawers on his toolbox while he fixed my van. And then I went into the town. This was right before Thanksgiving. Walked into the town to find some signs to paint. And the annually, that time of year was the time when the sign painter would paint Merry Christmas on all of the store front windows and all.
Oh yeah.
And the sign painter in that town had died the day before I broke down.
Wow.
And so that whole town was ready for me to paint Merry Christmas, Yuletide greetings and joy and wreaths and Santa Clauses and stuff. I was there for, several weeks, kept painting stuff and got introduced to a lot of the business people, designed a fancy menu for a restaurant and a logo for a cool Hemi engine Mopar car and a lot of stuff, jewelry place. Yeah. In addition, and I had at the time of my life, and it was one of those situations where I could have very well stayed right there, but I didn't. And then the next thing you know, I'm back on the highway and I go to the next place where I had even more of an adventure, and that it really was. It was a trip of a lifetime.
What you said snowbird, and I lived in South Florida, so very familiar with the term of people who
Yeah,
and my wife's family's from Michigan, and I remember going up there in July, the end of July, and
yeah,
man, the temperature is much nicer than it is here in Texas. It's so hot.
uh-huh.
But where in the South were you typically landing? Florida, Texas, the Arizona, where were you staying in the South?
Yep. It was most of the time it was Florida. I went to South Texas a couple times, but Florida ended up being more of a circus mecca. There's a lot of the circuses that winter there.
Huh.
And so yeah, it was always Florida.
Wow. Yeah, so that's interesting. I think about kind of that mindset that it really takes to go, well, I could plant here, or I could continue on to the next town and have like a separate adventure. And so, it's so weird because our human minds, we like clarity and certainty as much as we say that we're bored and we hate routine and all this stuff. Um, we like a sense of that certainty. And so I think kind of entrepreneurship in a way and kind of what you're talking about. I know when I left the corporate world, it's like, okay, you have each day, you can make as much happen as you want to as you can and enjoy it as much as you can. Um, and each day is kind of its own thing,
Hmm.
you know? And yeah. And I think when we try to plan too much, maybe that's when it gets crazy. And I think because maybe it's like we're trying to control it, by planning.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole, yeah, the mindset, maybe the freedom around it. But you know, you yeah, so during this time, So we've established people kind of winter in Florida and summers you're working, you're doing the snowbird thing, you're having adventures, you develop a problem with alcohol. What was the recovery process like? Reaching out, who did you tell, where did you go, and what was the recovery process like for you?
Well, it was interesting. My I got introduced to the process of recovery, and I was still on the road. So I went
Okay.
to the first AA meetings in Michigan. Then I went to meetings in Florida, and then I had work out in Kansas, and then I was in Arkansas, and then I was in Southern Illinois. I'm barely sober, and I come up with this brilliant idea that I should go to Carbondale, Illinois, and get a degree in graphic arts. And so I go there, and in the in the recovery community, where we have meetings just about every day. And at one of these meetings, I was attempting to communicate the frustration that I had been uh, experiencing at that time. And somebody out of the blue suggested, well, why don't you just go home? And that was something that just opened the dam of emotion because I had made a conscious selection as a teenager to leave my home because that was the problem.
Right.
So here I was in early sobriety. I had no home. And then right immediately after that, somebody suggested, well, if you had a home, where would you want it to be? And that's what uh, introduced me to the idea. And I selected Michigan because that was one of the places that I frequented the most, and I had friends there. So all of a sudden, I had a new goal, and that was to go to Michigan and make it my home. And my intention was to become the best sign painter of everybody in the town that I selected in Michigan. And so I went there, and see, God knew what he was doing. He knew I needed some stability at that point in my life. And so for the first 2 years in sobriety, I was planted in one place. I had a sponsor. We were doing the work. The You ask about the recovery process. One of the things that we do is called a moral inventory, where you go back through your life and you make a list of all of the people, all of the events, all of the things that happened, all of the emotional responses, the decisions, the beliefs that you adopted. All this stuff happens with the help of a sponsor. And those were the things that uncovered uh, my social ineptness, and it opened up uh, areas where my sponsor realized I needed guidance with, and so he would encourage me to end up growing and everything. And then 2 years into the process, the technology, you mentioned technology earlier on, technology was developing, and it was eliminating the role of the sign painter. So all of a sudden I was at the brink of not knowing what to do. Here I was with the goal of becoming the best sign painter in the whole town, and technology was taking it away. And I ended up discovering a huge market for putting murals on motorhomes, and it required having the ability to travel. And I knew how to travel and work and thrive because of my background with the circus. So at 2 years of sobriety, I hit the road, and I was on the road solid for 9 years, chasing motorhomes, putting murals on motorhomes. And then that attracted the attention of the largest RV dealership in the country, and they made it attractive for me to become their resident artist, which gave me stability again and gave me the ability to have a home of my own, which I have in Florida.
Wow, where in Michigan were you?
Jackson, Michigan,
Wow.
South
Yeah.
Central. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, I always say it's like one of those places that in Kansas, two places I've been that you don't think much when you say them, but when
Yeah.
you go there, they're actually pretty kind of cool places.
Definitely. Yeah, I get to spend the entire month of August in Michigan every year.
Oh man, that's got
Yeah.
to be nice.
It, it,
Someday I look forward to that. But yeah, you said that was the thing. I know how to travel and I'm gonna do that. And um I go, doesn't it sound familiar? Technology coming along, eliminating things that humans once did, but you were kind of able to carve out something that,
evolve.
yeah, man, that is awesome. And it's kind of one of those things of, now because essentially I was thinking you have car wraps. You know, there's
Yeah.
not the need for necessarily the hand painted mural, but guess what you're never going to do? You're never going to run a building through a machine. Somebody's going to have to paint the stuff on the sides of walls, whether it's downtown cities, that kind of stuff, it's still going to require, I think, a human. And so I think it's really about finding out where. And then, of course,
Finding,
there's also going to be an appreciation factor for something that was created by a human versus a machine as
yeah.
well. The
Yeah.
authenticity of it.
Yeah. What happened with technology when they started coming up with digital printed wraps is that eliminated the fad of having hand painted airbrushed murals on motorhomes. That was over with. But what ended up happening was it coincided with the building boom of Harley-Davidson dealerships, and some of these dealerships wanted some of those, like you just mentioned, big graphic pieces on the walls, both inside and out. And so whenever I was on site decorating at Harley Davidson stores, that's when I met the bikers. They would see me painting something and they'd say, "Hey, can you come out to the parking lot and look at my bike? I'd like something painted on the front fender." And that's when I figured it out. And so that's what I have today. I have a route of Harley Davidson dealerships between Philadelphia and Chicago, where I spend the summer months and at a different Harley store every week. And I set up my little booth in their parking lot and decorate, the front fender, put little lines on the tanks and the fenders and put their name on the back and little cartoon figures and
Man,
skull
you
frames.
you know what I was thinking about when you were talking about it earlier was, technology comes along and eliminates it. But now technology um amplifies and assists what you do in that with the click of a phone, you can tell how many people, hey, I'm going to be between Philly and Chicago this week, this week, this week, this week. And so almost like the one thing that tries to stab you in the back comes to the front and kind of gives you
Yeah,
another little hand of saying, hey,
yeah, I'm
um,
not such a bad guy after all.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. You're kind of, man, it's a lot of real life examples of things that we're almost kind of currently facing and how you've kind of evolved through them and
yeah,
continue to evolve. But
yeah, yeah.
what um I mean it sounds like you made the decision a long time ago. But how does one come to grips with this lifestyle of how do you approach it of I do this, I do that, I do a little bit of everything. I can say yes and no to the things I want. I'm not stuck here. I mean, you've kind of developed this nice little thing and set yourself up to the things that you like of having the routes in the summer months and the cool weather around bikes and the people you like. Um, yeah, how have you approached this to kind of to go you're not like the other people. You're not participating in this 9 to 5 type of thing.
I think that probably the word to use that would help understand this the best would probably be balance. What I've discovered at this point in my life is that there must be a balance between, uh, all things healthy. Got to have the right amount of sleep, the right nutrition, the right amount of spiritual uh, connection, participation, understanding. And as a people person, I need to have the right amount of opportunities for healthy interactions with people, which I get with the route of Harley-Davidson stores, and then the right balance of production, which brings about the income, and then the right amount of. So I think balance is probably because it's a full it's a full life. It's full of lots of stuff. The wonder of the road trip between the Harley stores, and then the exertion that takes place with the setting up. And then I actually tell everybody I get my yoga while I'm working on these motorcycles because sometimes I squat down and I'm there for a while putting a little design. Sometimes I have to lay down and reach up and put the line, in a delicate place on the motorcycle. So I get plenty of exercise. And then because of my ambition as an author and a writer, I get up early in the morning and I write typically for 2 hours every morning. So I think, balance with with many of the aspects of the lifestyle is the probably the secret that you're uh,
When did authoring kind of come into the mix?
well, it began with the inventory part of the recovery process, and then it evolved into marketing as I was making my mark in the motorhome industry, and then it evolved into writing essays, and then I ended up uh, meeting the professor of the creative writing department at SEU in Florida,
Uh-huh.
and became his friend and told him about it. And he
I
says,
took
"Well,
a creative writing class at Palm Beach Community College in Boca Raton, one of my
Boca,
favorite classes. Yes,
yeah."
sir.
And he befriended me, and he said, "Hey, let me see what you got." So I gave him uh, this thing that I'd strung together that was more content that you really needed for a book. And he read it for a year, and then he came back and says, "Hey, we're going to make a book out of this. I'm going to show you how." And so he became my first editor. And
What you mentioned you said you had written some essays. What were the essays for? Were you pursuing education or what were they for?
the essays at the beginning were uh, probably little personal vignettes in
Okay.
regard uh, something that had impressed me that I wanted to share with the world. See, there's probably still what drives me is the desire to connect with other people. And so these essays were a way of telling a story of something that was going on in my life, so, whether it was a funny story or a just
And
picturesque.
where were they published? I mean, because now we know we have Substack and you had blogs and all kinds of stuff, but that's kind of the other thing. I mean, were they for magazines? Were they in a class? What were they in relation to? Like,
Well, I had no real outlet way back then. The prior to that, marketing material would
hmm
show up in the publications of the RV industry. I would interview some of my more interesting clients and then write a story about their accomplishments and how the artwork uh, conveyed some aspect of their personality. And it was sort of a self promotion type interview uh, that that was used to establish the name Letterfly in that industry. But the essays that I wrote were more creative stuff there was really no outlet for that stuff way back then. I was just accumulating material. And so it didn't go out until the first book was published. Now I do send out a newsletter and I've been sending out a newsletter for oh 40 close, well, not quite 40 years. The original ones were printed on a giant piece of paper that were folded up and mailed out, and then they evolved into email. So now my email subscribers get a newsletter from me every 2 weeks. And then I put stuff on Substack, and there's another blog that my stuff shows up on too. So, um, yeah.
I gotta ask, during all this time, as you're making this journey and doing, man, just accumulating life experiences, where in do you find any time in there for love, wife, children, anything like that, or do you kind of keep it casual and have, um, like people would say, a friend in every port if you're in the military, or yeah,
That
how does that work? How do relationships work for someone with this lifestyle?
somebody with this lifestyle, it would take a special individual to join me. Now, I have had several uh, fulfilling relationships, and I've actually asked two women to marry me, but it just never was meant to be. And I don't know if it's because of my uh, relational ineptness initially that influences maybe making a bad selection, or whether it's simply something as simple as you know the the right woman just plain is not interested in an itinerant lifestyle. But I'm certainly still hopeful. I'm only looking for one.
Yeah, that and you know, um, yeah, I don't know. Like my dad's 70 something and he's single. My mom's six, I don't know. She's older too and single. And
Uh-huh.
um I'm their only child. And then they have my granddaughter. And
Uh-huh.
but I've been with my wife. We've been together for 19 years,
Uh-huh.
married, 12. Um, and so but as an only child too, I understand like that I need alone time. I know that I've had periods of feeling lonely, but I don't necessarily feel a general loneliness. I think that some people experience. Um, and we know that loneliness drives a lot of behaviors negative.
Yeah.
Um, how, being older, itinerant lifestyle, all that kind of stuff, for people out there who might be in a similar situation, what's your perspective and view on loneliness and fulfillment and how you kind of navigate, overcome that? And I mean, I'm certain it's through the relationships you make and each conversation you have is the opportunity to connect with somebody and fulfill something that doesn't necessarily make you lonely. So, but I think it's somebody in your situation could be lonely or not, but it's all a matter of perspective. So, what is your perspective on relationships and stuff as it relates to that?
The very first experience I had with having to, I guess, process that loneliness occurred after my 2 years of being stable in Jackson, Michigan. And I discovered that huge market that required me to travel. So all of a sudden, I'm freshly away from my security network and my intimate relationship with my sponsor. And I'm traveling the country, and it occurs in the middle of the night. I get lonely. It occurs to me that I am lonely. But the good news was, because I was learning spirituality and I had discovered there is always a remedy for whatever the problem is, I applied myself and I discovered a solution for loneliness. And back in those days, every little town had a drugstore, and in that every drugstore was a postcard rack. And since I'm a visual guy anyway, I was in the habit of going to and collecting postcards. And so in the middle of the night, I would, if I was lonely, I would take out my address book and I would look up somebody who I figured would enjoy receiving a postcard from me. And then I'd get their address and I'd write it on the postcard. And then I had to write one sentence to them and then find a stamp. And usually by that time I thought of somebody else that would like to receive a postcard from me. And then the next thing you know, I got 6 postcards ready to drop in the mailbox the next day, and I'm not feeling lonely anymore. So what I discovered was there is a solution. Now, here's what's interesting. I have a home in Florida. I purchased my home 27 years ago, and I have a 7-month route that I'm on the road every summer, different Harley store every week. When I get home, I go through grief because I'm coming in off the road. I love being on the road. I get home and I'm experiencing grief. And one of the other things that occurs when I'm at home is I get lonely because I don't have the steady diet of interacting with others that I get on the road in all these interesting places. The stimulation is just ongoingly engaging. And I get home and it's like, you're supposed to experience relief and connection and those kinds of things, but the thing that occurs is, wow, I'm lonely. So when I'm at home, I join some clubs, and I certainly join my recovery fellowship, and then invite the boys over for steak dinners and a
Yeah,
campfire and stuff. So, but there's always a solution.
man. That is wild, and that brings up, so much because I always say, like, the my podcast, it's a nod to the Waffle House. Me, where finding myself sitting at the Waffle House next to a stranger going, I wonder what his story is. I wonder what his story is.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm here having breakfast before I have to go be dad and husband. And, are they a trucker? It could have been you one day, maybe sitting in Conroe, Texas at the Waffle House going, is it somebody who's on their route in between places? Um, and that's kind of where these conversations come about. But what I wanted to ask you is, um, given your given your everything you've seen, everything you've done, all the people you talk to and come across, and having traveled so long in um, different parts of the country, um, what are you seeing out there as concerns for men of, how things have changed in the world? Um, as it relates to purpose, I always say I have 3 daughters. They can make their own money, so they don't need a man to provide for them anymore. So, what's required of a man is emotional presence and different things that women are looking for. Um, and then, of course, there's this whole, I always say, younger guys who use the apps, they don't have the confidence. The art of the conversation is gone. People forget about having to go up to a girl at the bar and ask for their phone number, ask them if they want to dance, and you might have to hit the dance floor. And if you don't like it, but that's what you had to do. And now
Uh-huh.
everything's so transactional via, we're more connected and less connected all at the same time. But what are you seeing out there that are the concerns of men right now? Yeah.
Yeah, you've certainly hit on some of them, and those are the kinds of things that I had to learn the hard way as the result of my self-inflicted uh, withdrawal from society. So there's going to be a learning curve for the young people who are not learning social skills today. They're not learning a work ethic and those kinds of things. And there's going to end up being a uh, they'll I guess some sort of a casualty. But the good news is, just like the way that my life unfolded, there will be an opportunity for a lesson for many of them who will end up going, well, wait a minute. Hey, I've been missing out, and I'm going to adopt the discipline of leaving my phone behind and learning some of the old school skills that were prevalent, before this phone was showed up. The concept of being quiet and meditating and finding connection, finding something to appreciate, and then what's becomes the most beneficial is developing the service mentality, becoming outgoingly interested in finding ways to be a benefit to the other person, and that's going to stimulate their ability to reach out and become conversational when they recognize a benefit that they can bring to the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the conversations you're having out there, of course, well, I would I would say I guess all kinds of people probably buy Harleys, but what are you getting real time in conversation with people of like um concerns, or whether it be like about the world, loneliness, the way of the world? Like, what are you picking up in conversation with people in terms of hopeful, um, not hopeful? Um, yeah,
There are always going to be the people who complain about, there's plenty of things to complain about, but I ended up recognizing the the fact that there was no upside. This occurred to me when George W. Bush was the president. That's when I realized there was no upside to complaining about the president. And I became more of an observer instead of a judge and a jury and an executioner. I became more of an observer. And one of the things I noticed was that there were two different ways of looking at what the president did. And one way you'd complain about it, and the other way you'd commend the guy about it. So I all of a sudden I realized that what was actually taking place had very little to do with the reception or the perception of the observer. And so, in order for me to become uh, effective, I had to just stay out of the judgment arena and simply be an observer, and then keep the service mentality uh, for in the forefront so that I could find ways to be of benefit in regards to those kinds of things. And I've learned in the art of conversation that there's always, if this conversation is spiraling down to a horrible future destination, the thing for me to do is to introduce an upgrade. Just interrupt things and give them an upgrade, and then
I like that.
usually the conversation will turn around, and all of a sudden people will start coming up with encouraging things to do.
Yeah.
And
So, um, you talk about service a lot, and you're able to service kind of authoring. That was a way to kind of serve the world, correct? You had all these things to say. You do not want people to make the same mistakes you do. Um, you have your groups, your AA groups and whatnot. And then of course painting, the Harley shops and whatnot, um, that's kind of an income, and you're providing a service to these people. But how do you look at service when you're on the road, kind of doing the occupation? Do you look at like each conversation, each painting as the opportunity to um, serve, whether it be wisdom, um, knowledge, anything, or
Yeah, yeah, and certainly uh oftentimes my customers are asking me to interpret something and make it into an expression of their uh scope of their personality. So it ends up being a creative challenge. And so that's one way to be of service to my customers, to come up with the most incredible concept I can possibly come up with. And then, like you already mentioned, authoring, if I can show how my experience, the lessons that I learned from the experiences that I went through can benefit the reader, that's me being of service to others. And then sometimes on just a simple level, like if I pull into a giant shopping center with the rig to park overnight, and if I see a shopping cart that got pushed all the way out to the bus stop, I'll go out there and I'll push it all the way back to the store. That's another way to be of service and get a little exercise in at the same time. So,
man. Oh, so you drive a whole big rig around.
yeah, big RV. I got all the comforts of home everywhere I go.
Did you when you were have you ever done the route on a bike alone?
No, a motorcyclist? No, no. I got too much gear I need to haul around.
Do you ride?
I've ridden, as you're already well aware, I've ridden horses for 30 some years, and I had a motorcycle for several years, but no, I don't have a motorcycle now, and I don't have a horse either. So riding is something that's in my past.
Now, with the horses, do you since you obviously do this kind of mobile thing, do you still kind of have a passion for that? Do you stop off like I know I interviewed Shane from the Horsemanship Journey, who does kind of like a recovery thing out in Colorado. Do you still dabble in horsing, whether it be training, or do you strictly ride or do any of these programs with speaking?
And not yet. I certainly keep in touch with my horsemanship friends so we can keep the conversation going. And then I daydream about a trip to Portugal to ride some of the best, horses on the planet. Yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, because yeah, horsemanship is still I'm very passionate about it. Uh, yeah,
It's kind of
even though.
like you have so many of those things that I look at going kind of like this thought of going like should technology or something happen and the Harley route goes out, it's like, oh, what's he doing now? Oh, he's in Portugal riding horses or training horses.
Yeah,
Um, you know, um, yeah, kind of like your skills and your adaptability from everything you've done. Um, it's almost kind of played out that way, you know?
definitely. And that's one of the things that I've learned is that this life requires an ongoing willingness to evolve into something different. It's like one of the sayings is uh, change is the only thing that's never going to change is the fact that everything is going to change. Uh, and that's one. And another, so I can use my vivid imagination to come up with, like you just did, a scenario uh, that would be a possible alternative to what I'm doing today. Another one is I've got a client who has a circus, and I've been doing all of his signs and I constructed the entrance portal and a ticket box, and I fabricated a lot of stuff for him because I know how they need to be built to be portable and rugged and everything. And I painted stuff and built stuff for him for 11 years. He loves hand painted artwork, and that's opened another possibility. There is a circus in France
Oh,
that has 60% of their acts have horses in them. That's their specialty. It's a big, huge family, and that's what their specialty is incredible feats of horsemanship. And I've been daydreaming with the idea of offering my services and becoming the resident artist and going over there and painting little delicate designs and things like that on their circus equipment. And that would be another incredible uh, thing to go do. Just go to France and decorate for the circus and hang around a bunch of great horses.
man. Yeah, you're right up my alley because I think about that. I did that whole corporate thing, and when I got laid off in 2020, I was like, eh. And my daughter's like, you know, maybe start a podcast, and she goes to an art school, which they didn't have when I was growing up. And that's the reason we stay here, but it only goes through the eighth grade. And when she goes into the ninth grade, she'll either have to go to one of the public schools, or my idea is I would rather just get like a Sprinter van and do homeschool and travel to all 50 states,
Uh-huh.
podcasting. Um, Need to find some other skills, tap into some of my other skills, but travel and let her see the places and meet the people as opposed to reading it in a book, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and also while she's doing that, be part of the podcast and the production because like their junior high kids write the plays and do the audio and stuff. And so yeah, in 3 or 4 years when she's going into high school, that's what I want to do is to have this and some skills in place that I could get a Sprinter van and her and I can hit the road and her high school till she turns 18 can be that and developing something else. Um, kind of
I
like you said, and if it happens or can, I would be open to going overseas. I mean, I was stationed in Japan. I had my 19th birthday in Japan.
huh. I'm going to recommend now that I understand your ambition, I'm going to recommend you read my book called Hit the Road and Thrive. It
Yes.
was actually inspired by one of my customers who said, Dave, you are living the dream, traveling around the country, doing what you love, making people happy with what you do. You should write a book on how to do it. And so I did. And I made this book. I made the manuscript available for all the listeners of your show for free. All
Oh,
you have to do is go to the website daveletterfly.com and you can get the download of the book for free.
sweet. I will put that in the show notes. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of it's interesting because you when I think about it, it's like that all comes from being laid off and reapplying and my daughter going, "Do you really want 2 a.m. phone calls?" and me going, "Well, I mean, I do Uber Eats. It's kind of like, hey, I'll figure it out. I mean, I have a master's degree. I learned how to podcast. I have other skills I can do. I come from a healthcare background, but I lost 64 pounds. I was a personal trainer. I can do accountability coaching. So
Uh-huh.
there's so many avenues and kind of the direction the world is, you've taken something and a couple of things and made them work for you at opportune times and integrated that technology and myself as a 49-year-old finding myself where I'm at. It's like, if you can, I always say, if you can bend without breaking, like a palm tree, be
Yeah.
flexible. You never know because I never thought that this is what I'd be doing. But yeah, what um is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
Huh, that's a good question. Yeah. What I want to do is recommend to all of your listeners to remain open instead of being tempted to be judgmental or even uh, entertain negative thoughts of self-pity or something in regards to the challenges that we go through. Just simply remain open and by remaining open, we end up creating a place for a doorway to open. And then oftentimes it leads us into like you're right now, you're at the brink of creating the next uh, wholesome chapter of your life. So, what I recommend doing, and that's the way my entire career has gone, is uh, things would happen and things would change, and I would have to adapt, and sometimes I was forced to adapt, kicking and screaming into the next chapter of my life, and then I would uh, change into a somebody completely different, and then God was able to provide me with another gift, and the next thing you know, and one of the things that I was impressed with as a kid, I read a quote by Ernest Hemingway, and that was, if there's one thing that an author has to do, and that is to live an interesting life.
Oh,
I think that that's one of the reasons why I have been driven to just constantly be discovering, exploring, and looking and observing, is because that's how we get to experience an interesting life as we go through this moment that we're in.
you seem like I just had this interesting thought of like you seem like a person that uh don't tell you I can't.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember my dad saying that. You can't possibly do that. And all it did was make me want to do it even more.
Well, yeah, because I think of it from this point of view, especially at my age, and I think we just live in this kind of interesting time, and without trying to, take it to a political or anything, but kind of since 2020, we're starting to wake up to the fact that maybe, not maybe, we really haven't been told the truth, and people keep telling us not the truth. And it's like at some point in time, we're just going to be like, okay, I'm just not going to listen to anything you say, and I'm just going to 100% truly do what's best for me.
Yeah. Huh?
And all of us are kind of reaching that at an individual level and maybe kind of as a society. But I think if we can, keep the humanity and service together and go, when I say do what's best for me, I don't mean selfish, but I mean us as a society and humanity, meaning that, hey, we're just all human beings. Like, we don't need manufactured tension or problems. Like, we're
Uh-huh.
all just trying to get by. So let's be nice to one another. And, you know, their thing is you can kind of live this life of independence, this life of freedom. And I think that's kind of what you have and represent as necessarily as, you participate in the things you want as much as you want. You don't necessarily have to have this 9 to 5 corporate thing, but you've made some of your skills work for you and um, as an entrepreneur. And that's kind of the real freedom of entrepreneurship is
Mhm.
not necessarily, oh, I'm going to be rich like Jeff Bezos, but this kind of freedom of movement and time, even though you kind of work a lot because you're responsible for everything. But
Mhm.
you're also, I always say is I trust me and my decisions
Yeah.
over other people's decisions. And so I can do what's best for me. And yeah, your journey and everything, when I see that, I go, that's kind of what you represent to me.
Oh,
Um,
good.
and man, it's inspiring because people need to know that I guess they can do it. And it
Yep. There's
just
hope.
takes I wouldn't say it's a different mindset, just a different way of looking at the world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But, yeah, anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, certainly an invitation for them to get my book, Hit the Road and Thrive, 7 Secrets for Living the Dream, available for free as a download at the website daveletterfly.com.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to hit that up
Oh, good.
because I just told you what my dreams are.
Yeah.
And yeah, I need to know how to be successful in doing that. But
Yep.
I'll definitely keep following your journey. But as I like to say, um, go out there and be the person that you would want to meet.
There you go. That's great advice. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for spending your time with me and my listeners. And till next time.
Thank you so much.
All right, man.
Let go.
Asteroid of fear.